Washington football team going through what y'all need to know to make some money on this team in 2021. So last year, 7-9, the best of a real bad division, pretty famously with the NFC East last year. But obviously, some really encouraging things as far as this specific roster goes. Mostly defensively, really, really good on that side of the ball. We'll talk about why and what that's going to look like this year and if it's going to sustain itself. But overall, given the struggles offensively they had, what they had to deal with the quarterback position, not too bad of a year. As far as my record on them goes, it's another team, more money, 8-4-1. The strong bets, those are the only ones I'm actually putting money on, so we're chilling there. Overall, 24-21-2. I did struggle a little bit with understanding exactly what made their defense good. I'm a lot more comfortable with it now. Actually, I think I had similar things go wrong with this team as I did with the Eagles, another NFC East team. Still obviously good, and you're making money with both of them, but that is something I'll mention with this. But as far as this team for 2021, so losses-wise, there's not a bunch of names, but there are some important ones. Offensively, you do lose Morgan Moses, and I don't think that's nearly the big deal that some people seem to think it is. I will say it is odd timing to just cut him in the middle of the offseason for sure. And he has been a starter here for a long time and a okay starter, but I don't want to pretend like Morgan Moses is this like great above average or whatever tackle. He's fine. He's mentally very good. He's not going to make a lot of mistakes in pass protection. He's going to understand assignments, how to pick up blitzes and that type of thing. But his actual athlete, his actual guy on the field, he's not exactly ideal. He's pretty slow laterally as a run blocker. If he's not like double teaming dudes at the point of attack, he's not particularly good at all. And again, with rushers, if somebody really has speed, really has ability to bend the corner, then they're gonna expose him a little bit. That all that to say, he's probably worthy of being a starter in the NFL, I guess, on the lower end, but not that big of a loss. They also lose Jaron Christian, frankly, a player who's right in that same tier, a guy who's shown that he can start in the NFL. Not be amazing, but I actually like him a little bit. He goes for free to the Texans. You also lose Alex Smith. He's a nice story, but as far as his on-the-field product goes last year, not ideal if you're really trying to be a good team. Dontrell Inman is actually an underrated receiver. He's a useful NFL receiver, has been every year of his career, whatever though. And then Marcus Baugh is reserve tight end. Defensively, definitely some bigger stuff. The only really important ones, though, so those first two corners, Ronald Darby, Fabian Moreau, both good players. Ronald Darby, definitely good, played very well in the scheme, in the system. He moves on to the Broncos. And Fabian Moreau, a guy who I think should have probably got more snaps over his career here. I will admit that there were better corners in front of him, so I understand why not. But pretty decent player that you're kind of letting walk out the door for nothing. Again, you'll lose Ryan Kerrigan. Ryan Kerrigan still has it, still a good player. And they do lack depth at that position. That's a little concerning. Past those guys, though, Kevin Pierre-Lewis, Thomas Davis, Sean Dan Hamilton, three varying levels of awful linebacker. Kevin Pierre-Lewis single-handedly lost this team some games pretty much at the beginning of the year. Thomas Davis is, at this age, horrible. And Sean Dan Hamilton, well, the best of the three, not very good. And you also lose Ryan Anderson, former high-ish pick who never really turned out, but he's actually an okay rotational player. Whatever, though, additions-wise, bring in Charles Leonard, bring in Eric Flowers, two starting-level offensive linemen. We'll talk more about their specific strengths and weaknesses later, but two signings I'm more than happy with for sure. And at receiver, so you bring in Adam Humphries, who's definitely a useful player, and you bring in Curtis Samuel. I'm going to talk about Curtis Samuel quite a bit because he's very important to how this offense is going to function. And while I don't think he's quite the elite player that maybe his contract dictates at this point, it's not like he was gigantic, and he's definitely good. And then obviously you bring in Ryan Fitzpatrick to be your new starter, which we'll cover. Defensively, another round of good ones. William Jackson III, corner I'm a pretty big fan of. They bring him in to be the new number one. Happy with that. Darryl Roberts, I actually think if he's not being asked to play ridiculous snaps in the slot as a 6'2" outside press corner by Matt Patricia, then he's a useful player. And then Bobby McCain is actually a pretty good veteran who's performed decently for the Dolphins for a number of years. Draft class wise, this is what it looks like with rookies. Once they play in the NFL, we can talk about how good they are. Until then, I don't think there's a whole lot of point in creating expectations for yourself one way or the other. But this is their draft class. So, position by position, let's go through this roster. The number in the top right is the total number of players at the position I've ranked, so 70 quarterbacks. And the number to the right of the name is where that player is out of that. So Ryan Fitzpatrick, the 20th out of 70. So, Ryan Fitzpatrick. The way that I'm going to talk about him is in pretty direct opposition to his reputation around the league in a lot of ways. But I think that reputation is like very unfounded the vast majority of the time, right? So Ryan Fitzpatrick, when people think of him, obviously you think of the whole Fitzmagic thing. You think of like a old school gunslinger who tosses YOLO balls up and down the field all day, doesn't care if he can turn the ball over, and is just kind of out there to have fun, that type of shit. I don't think that represents Ryan Fitzpatrick as a player, like at all, to be honest with you. I will grant that when he played for Bruce Arians and the Buccaneers, it looked that way. But hey, look at every other quarterback who's ever played for Bruce Arians, and they do the same shit, if not worse. Jameis Winston, Carson Palmer, even this last year, Tom Brady obviously was a lot better at it, but he was even doing things uncharacteristic to himself. Ryan Fitzpatrick, though, when he plays in more normal offenses, like literally last year all the way on the Dolphins, he's way more, I would argue, of a quarterback who's like a system guy as far as he's going to take short throws, he's going to take easier throws, he's going to take what the offense dictates he does. He's not actually going to attempt all that much outside of structure. Now, he's still way further down path than a guy like, Derek Carr or something like that. But he's a lot more of like a pilot the offense type guy than he is known as, way more. And that's an important distinction when we talk about how this offense is going to work and their good parts and bad parts, because how the quarterback, runs the offense obviously dictates basically everything. So that is something I think really important to talk about with Ryan Fitzpatrick. So yeah, he is pretty decent at that type of stuff. And I will say he does have some tendencies. If he's like flushed out of the pocket, he will get pretty risky. He will end up throwing the ball into weird spots down the field. I will definitely give you that, but it's not at that big of a level. Past him though, this is actually because it's not one of the best quarterback rooms because of the top end, but it's one of the most complete in terms of they have three guys who I'm actually fairly comfortable with as starters. None of these guys are guys, if I'm really trying to like win a Super Bowl or anything, I want even close to my starting lineup. But Kyle Allen, Taylor Heineke as backups are both like a little bit good. Kyle Allen has shown over actually a decent number of snaps between the Panthers and here that he is going to like provide production for your offense. Now, he gets turnover prone at times. He's not like elite. He definitely has issues as far as a guy who's reading NFL defenses. He can get, again, super risky outside. I think he actually fits Ryan Fitzpatrick's reputation a lot better than Ryan Fitzpatrick does in a lot of ways, in terms of a guy who's going to just lose his mind out of the pocket and throw shit just up in the air for anybody to catch. But when he's not doing that, he actually has pretty good arm talent. Again, he can, in a clean pocket, make some throws. It's like, yeah, you know what? It's not bad. Taylor Heineke, I honestly could argue for him being ranked a lot higher than 28th. He was a player I talked about going into the playoffs last year about how good I think he was every time he's been on an NFL field. And hey, turns out completely right. He played very well against the Buccaneers in the playoff game. And there was like legitimate reasons for that. I wasn't just getting lucky. The dude actually does things at the quarterback position that generally don't exist outside of the top like 10, 12. He shows like a legitimate anticipation of where his receivers are going to end up on the field. He is willing to try things and throw with touch into tighter areas, tighter windows down the field. And he actually showed the ability to be able to do it at times. He has decent mobility. And overall, like he does things that are really helpful for an offense. Now, he's not ideal, I will say. He's not this like genius as far as reading defenses goes. As a guy who's putting the ball in the air earlier rather than later, but also doesn't have the greatest arm strength, he can kind of get dangerous sometimes if you're facing, good secondary players. But overall, he's a guy that I'm, a decently large fan of. I don't think he's too bad at all. So let me get to the running backs. Antonio Gibson. So when I used to talk about running backs, right, there's only like 3 to 5 that really matter. I've kind of amended that. I think it's more like 8 to 10. And the reason I say that is because I think Antonio Gibson legitimately is one of those guys, or at the very least has a chance to be. Antonio Gibson's very good. Like, he's super explosive, really fast. He's actually pretty big, and despite his size, he can cause clean misses from players trying to tackle him, which, there's a big difference between getting hit and bouncing off and slowing down and just making the guy miss and being able to accelerate into more space down the field. He does the latter. He's actually good behind the line of scrimmage, like at the handoff about finding holes, finding the correct gaps to run into. His vision's pretty good. Like he, as a receiver, even again, he's very explosive. Not exactly great, as a route runner or anything like that, but super encouraging. Antonio Gibson is extremely good. And then past him, J.D. McKissick, he's one of the players that makes me wish that I had my YouTube channel going into last year, because I would have talked about how good I thought J.D. McKissick was. Now, he's not amazing or anything, but, he kind of got slotted into this big class of like receiving third down scat backs who are just kind of getting targets because they're the pass catching running back in their offense. Think of guys like Theo Riddick or Devontae Booker or stuff like that. J.D. McKissick's so much better than them. He's legitimately good as a receiver. If you give him 10 targets, he's actually going to be adding value to your team as opposed to just being the guy who got 10 targets, right? He's really good. He understands how to find space or like near-ish the line of scrimmage. He's very quick. He has good skills as a receiver as far as like playing the ball and actually catching the ball. And even as a runner, while he's not great at that, he's fine. He's fast enough to be decent. He's not like an idiot as far as finding holes. Like J.D. McKissick's good. And his production last year makes a lot of sense with that in mind. Past those two, it gets a lot worse. Peyton Barber, Lamar Miller, both guys you really shouldn't have on the field at this point for various reasons. Peyton Barber, mentally he's there. He can find holes. He functions okay as a goal line back, that type of stuff. But he is just so non-explosive compared to like every other decent running back in the NFL that it just limits your ups. Anytime you give him a carry, you're just potentially hurting yourself because of what he's not going to be able to make happen on the field. And what he does make happen again, if it's not like 1.5 yards that you're really shooting for, then he's not particularly helpful with it. Lamar Miller, player who used to be pretty decent because he could run fast in a straight line, but now, he hasn't been relevant in multiple years at the running back position. That's concerning. It's not like he was all that good to start with, so whatever. Jonathan Williams has had some hype, but like it's about those top two. Speaking of wide receivers, so I'm going to start with the positives here, as I always do. And boy, is there a big one at the top. Terry McLaurin is amazing. Terry McLaurin is he is right on that edge of elite receivers. He's so good. I would say he is an elite receiver. There's a tier, in the very top, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, guys like that of where you're even going past like whatever elite means to you. But Terry McLaurin does like almost every positive thing you could want a receiver to do in the modern NFL. He's a guy who legitimately creates separation very consistently. He's very fast. He plays the ball well in the air. He actually has strong hands despite not being super big. And he's overall very good. He can do some stuff with the ball after the catch. Like overall, he's great. I will say, just to point out his weaknesses real quick, he's not super physical. While he does make plays sometimes in the air, he's amazing about that. He's not like elite after the catch. So all that stuff kind of adds up to him not being like top 10 or whatever. But don't get it twisted. Terry McLaurin is super valuable in the modern NFL and is going to constantly, on a game by game basis, like help your team succeed massively. Then you have Curtis Samuel. Now, Curtis Samuel's an interesting one for sure. He offers some skills that are exceedingly valuable and some of like the top at his position as far as these specific things. What are those? Well, obviously, as his reputation dictates, after the catch or as a ball carrier, even a running back at times, he is really good. He's crazy quick, very explosive. Like he plays through contact even decently for someone his size. Curtis Samuel's awesome about that. He also, for a guy his size, is pretty good about getting up and competing at the catch point and actually coming down with stuff that most other guys, again, his size, aren't going to do very often. And because of how fast and how quick he is, if you give him like 5 seconds to run, he's going to be open like every single time. He's a lot like Calvin Ridley in that way, where those guys, if it's in like man coverage and they have 5 seconds, literally doesn't matter. They're going to be open every single time. Now, there's a lot of receivers like that, or not a lot, not the same way that Curtis Samuel does it, but like 5 seconds is a lot of time to cover anybody. But Curtis Samuel is at the very top of that skill set. So that sounds amazing, right? Why is he not even better than like 30th? Why is he not elite himself? Well, he's actually one of these guys similar to a player like Tyler Lockett, somebody I talked about with this too, where despite how quick and explosive they are, as far as like initial route tree route runners, they're not all that good at it. as a guy who's going to get open on like a slant consistently or think that type of thing. Curtis Samuel's not actually all that good. Now he's okay. He's like decent. He's more than passable. He's going to function fine in your offense. That's not what I'm saying, but just he's not somebody who's going to like murder people and get wide open, very quickly after the snap of ball, the way that Terry McLaurin does even on his own team. So I just want to mention that as a reason what kind of tampers his value a little bit, but overall, still as a wide receiver too, especially very, very good. So then you have Adam Humphries, a guy who the dude works underneath. Like he's proven he understands how NFL defenses work. He finds space very well. He actually has decent hands. Like he's overall good. He can do a little bit actually after the catch, and is a guy who's not completely limited to short routes out of the slot. Overall, definitely a useful player who helps drive your offense because of how consistently he's going to provide an easy option for your quarterback. So those are your top three, and you're golden there. Past that, not so much. You have a guy named Golden, but Golden, he is not. So Antonio Gandy-Golden, rookie last year, didn't play a whole lot of snaps. I will grant you that. So it is a small sample size. But in those snaps, he did like nothing that was impressive, basically. In the modern NFL, a lot of these big rowdy receivers kind of fall into this trap of, well, theoretically they should be good at, going up and getting the ball and high pointing the ball and running fast in a straight line because how long their legs are and stuff like that. But in practice, a lot of times what you get is just somebody who can't separate, can't get open. And it's really hard to make contested catches at a rate like beyond 50 something %, no matter how big you are, unless you're literally like Calvin Johnson. And Gandy Golden, again, he's nowhere near that. I think he really falls into that trap. And then you have Cam Sims. As a receiver, he's actually the same thing. He's just like this big, kind of slow, non-agile guy who doesn't get separation. He does have the unique thing, which keeps him a lot higher than the guys around him, in that he's actually pretty good after the catch for kind of whatever reason. Again, he's not particularly fast. He's not quick, whatever, but he kind of has like it as a ball carrier on like screens and stuff like that. He's pretty damn good at it. Now that only gets you so far, especially because it's not like he's amazing. He's not like Curtis Samuel out there. But that is kind of a unique quirk about him. Steven Sims Jr., he is one of these guys who's like the epitome of he's productive because he's getting the targets from the slot that modern NFL offenses like feed that make people open no matter how good or bad they are. As far as what he is actually adding to your offense, I have real concerns. I don't think it's much at all. And so I will say keep that in mind with him. Then you have De'Ami Brown, highest round rookie, but he is a rookie. Isaiah Wright, a guy who is kind of fast, but again, what is he actually adding to your offense when he's playing for you at the receiver position? Not much. DeAndre Carter is just a returner. And then I will talk about Kelvin Harmon real quick. Kelvin Harmon is, of all these players, frankly, I think potentially the best. He's not ranked quite that high because he's a really small sample size, but he's a guy who, at the very least, despite being as big as he is, I thought showed before he had a bad injury, I believe last year, maybe it was the year before, that he knows how to work a little bit. He knows how to kind of find space down the field. He's like not unreasonably slow to cut in his or to get in and out of his breaks. Like he's a player I could actually see being very comfortably the fourth best receiver on this team. So I will mention that. At tight end, Logan Thomas. Logan Thomas. People love him because he put up fancy numbers last year. But he's another one of these guys when if you take a step back and say, okay, what is he doing? What is he providing for your offense as opposed to what is happening to him through the offense he's playing in? I started to get concerned. Now, I do think he's starter worthy in the NFL for sure. He's decent. He does add some valuable things. You're comfortable with him as a starter. But what does he actually do? So we talk about I will say his positives first. He is a reasonable athlete for the position. He's not going to be super slow or anything like that. He does have pretty damn strong hands, actually, for a guy who played quarterback until very recently. He's pretty good about that. He is large, so he can make plays in the air. He can be a threat in the red zone, all that type of stuff. And again, if you're just asking to run like 2, 3, 4, 5 yards and find somewhere to sit down and gets open a little bit, he's going to be able to do that to a point. But he isn't a guy who beats man coverage very often at all, unless he's playing against a really bad player generally. He isn't like this elite zone buster the way that legitimately good tight ends are. He's just kind of okay at it. He isn't super fast or a super athlete down the field, so it's not like he's this big threat as a big play guy. He's not a good blocker, and he isn't someone who, after the catch, is particularly notable either. So I really have concerns about how good he actually is, opposed to being fed a lot of targets last year in a pretty bad offense with quarterback and Alex Smith, who just wanted to throw the ball short. So keep that in mind with Logan Thomas. And past him, they're not good. Tamar Hemingway actually played very few, like okay snaps last year. Nothing that made me excited though. You have some rookies. Tyrone Swopes is a college quarterback. Ricky Seals-Jones is the next biggest name on this list. He's had some production at times when he's played for really good offenses, but as far as again, what does he actually provide on the field? Not much, despite being theoretically a very good athlete. He just in practice doesn't really do all that much. And then we go to the offensive line. So this offensive line, it's all right. I think it falls in about the same tier as it did last year, where it's not going to kill you, but we'll talk about what's good and bad here. So at the tackle position, they're going to get okay play pretty much guaranteed. Charles Leno, Cornelius Lucas, and even David Sharp actually back up there. I think are pretty damn similar players overall. Leno and Lucas especially, they're both like above average, more than comfortable pass blockers who are definitely not going to get you killed in that area, who are going to function just fine. They played well for a really long time. Actually, I believe both on the Bears, funny enough, but both guys who are good at that. They, however, are both guys who also do struggle with the actual high-end elite pass rushers. Like if you throw them up against a Myles Garrett, a Danielle Hunter, a Bosa brother, you're going to have some issues. And then they both also are really, really mediocre as run blockers. Neither of them do a particularly good job of moving guys. They don't like hit dudes in space all that well. They're both kind of finesse pass blockers. That's not bad, though. That is a skill set that you can work with in the NFL. But I will just mention that. David Sharp, a guy who is maybe could be a guard. Maybe he's a tackle. He's played for the Raiders before. I think every time he's been on the field, he's shown that actually he can function. He's not going to get your offense killed. I'm more than comfortable with him as a starter at times throughout a year. And I think, again, he could play guard pretty well. And then you have Sam Cosmi, a rookie who actually right now, despite how this list looks, might start at right tackle. And, we'll see. Keep in mind, rookie tackles are very, very, very rarely good, especially at the beginning of their rookie seasons. So that might be kind of scary. But they like him. We'll see. And I do think because of those first two, they have a baseline of decent play there. They also have Sadiq Charles, a player that they like, apparently. He played like one snap before he got seriously injured. Should probably be unranked, frankly, but not a guy who I was impressed with. That one snap, whatever. At guard, you have Brandon Scherf. I will fight back a little bit on this whole like Brandon Scherf is elite thing. I don't think that's all that close to being true. He's definitely very good. He's definitely a big positive. He's definitely a guy who's worth starting on literally every interior offensive line in the league. So don't get it twisted there, except for maybe the Browns. But what keeps him out of that elite tier, I think, is just I think he loses too much. Now, he's not like out here getting bullied ever or anything like that. But when you compare him to guys at the top, like a Brandon Brooks, like a Zach Martin, stuff like that, he will get kind of thrown off balance or miss at the line of scrimmage, especially in the run game, a lot more than those guys do. Now, he's still a very good athlete. Like, he moves pretty well. He's going to eliminate second-level defenders. Again, he's a positive player for sure. As a pass protector, he's very smart. He's pretty damn good. I like him a lot. But his frequency of getting beat is just higher than the guards above him, something I'll just mention. Still very good. Then you bring back Eric Flowers, a guy who, as far as I'm concerned, has proven he can start pretty decently at guard in the NFL at this level. He was good on the decent. He was decent on the Dolphins last year. Definitely not the reason that their offensive line or offense was bad. Far from it. He was good the year before with the Washington football team. The dude he can play as a guard just fine. He's going to be a competent pass protector from that position as a run blocker while he is a little bit slow, not a crazy athlete, or at least because theoretically he is, I'm pretty sure, but like in practice, not a guy who zooms around the field, but he can do some work as like a double team guy, whatever. He's fine as a starter. Their depth is not particularly good. Wes Schweitzer, I will give, did play better than I ever would have expected last year from the guard spot, because when he was on the Falcons before coming to this team, I thought he was legitimately one of the absolute worst players and definitely one of the worst offensive linemen in the entirety of the NFL. That wasn't really the case last year. He definitely played a lot better than that. Now, was he great or good or really starter worthy? I don't necessarily think so. He still has real issues as far as just getting thrown at the line of scrimmage at times. He doesn't actually make an impact as a run blocker. Like, he's still not somebody you want starting, but as a depth piece, maybe I've come around a little bit because he did show literally on this team last year that he can be in a guard and not have your team suck. So, hey, there's something to that. Wes Martin, however, he is bad. He's definitely really bad. You don't want him playing. At center, Chase Roulier. So Chase Roulier is a little bit of a throwback center. He's a lot bigger and a lot slower and a lot fatter than a lot of these modern, like little tiny centers who go zooming around the field. Now that has pros and cons, because while it does limit what you can ask him to do as a run blocker and the types of rushers he can deal with as a pass protector, it does give him the ability to move dudes off the line of scrimmage a little bit better. He can handle bull rushers a little bit better. Like, overall, he's a decent player, guy I'm fine with starting at center. Not going to make a huge impact, but definitely a guy who doesn't suck. So how does this offense function as a whole? Well, yeah, this offense, I actually think they have a pretty decent baseline of being able to move the ball up and down the field. But I do struggle with seeing the real ceiling for this being a good offense, not just on a season basis, but on a game-to-game basis, right? Because it's key. You got to remember how Ryan Fitzpatrick actually functions in these types of offenses. And when you look at it through that lens, you're talking about an offensive line who's decent, but not great, not elitist pass protectors, not going to like bulldoze teams in the run game barely ever. Like, they're going to do a good job for sure. Not much more past that. You have receivers, especially Terry McLaurin, who's going to be open like all the time, and you have some other useful pieces in Adam Humphries, Curtis Samuel, Logan Thomas around him for sure. But you have Ryan Fitzpatrick, generally getting the ball out pretty quick, playing in the system a lot of times, and it's going to go okay for sure. I don't worry too much about them getting like absolutely shut down in any given game, but they're going to depend a lot on Terry McLaurin to actually move the ball, and for Ryan Fitzpatrick to lean into what makes Curtis Samuel legitimately valuable and Terry McLaurin elite. It does lean into more of his bad tendencies as far as getting out of the pocket and starting to do a little bit more of that gunslinger YOLO stuff, and that's going to create some issues, and I don't necessarily know how often he's going to be looking to do that. And when that's the case, then outside of McLaurin, again, you're leaning on Curtis Samuel and Logan Thomas, two guys who I'm not actually particularly impressed with is like drive movers. So yeah, their offense I think is going to be decent, but I do think they're going to struggle a little bit with consistently generating big plays, despite how good some of their talent is at it, because of the way that their offense is going to work and Ryan Fitzpatrick quarterback. Now, it's not nothing. Again, Curtis Samuel, Antonio Gibson, Terry McLaurin can all go off any given play for sure, but it's not structurally there the way that I want it to be, and that it is for a lot of other offenses. But that's not necessarily the end of the world, because now we get to talk about this defense, and yeah. So we start on the interior. Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, two exceedingly good starters of their positions. Jonathan Allen is a defensive tackle who is consistently making plays in and around the backfield. He has very, very good hands. He's a deep, like above average pass rusher for sure. Not super explosive in that area, but more than good enough to collapse the pocket and to be a guy who you're worried about if you're an opposing offense. And again, very, very good run defender. Deron Payne, kind of the same player in a lot of ways, just a little bit bigger and a little bit more run-centric, but still very good. Actually has some like moves as a bigger nose tackle, as a pass rusher, that are useful. Like, Deron Payne is awesome in basically every way. He just a little bit lacking in the super great pass rushing department, which is fine. The really important player here, though, is backup rotation guy Matt Ioannidis. I'm going to talk about him a lot more once we talk about how the defense works as a whole. But keep in mind that Matt Ioannidis is not just a guy who wins as pass rusher. He is a guy who wins cleanly. There's a difference, right? Generally, I think there's, obviously it's a lot more complex than this, but good pass rushers fall into one of two impactful ways of rushing. It's either they are like collapsing the pocket, getting around the quarterback, making him change up what he's doing a little bit, like making him comfortable, that type of thing, and forcing tackles to get like into his way or interior line. Or there's rushers who win themselves, who are like creating their own clear lanes to the quarterback, or doing it quickly off the snap of the ball, and who are single-handedly making the quarterback change what he was doing to deal with their presence and the way that they're coming at them. Matt Ioannidis is kind of unique on this team, as we'll talk about, and that he is the second kind. He is a guy who legitimately gets at the quarterback free, and that's something to keep in mind. Past him, you also have Devereaux Lawrence, a player who, despite not playing a huge amount of snaps, I actually go to bat for. I think he's shown to be pretty good. He's a guy I'm comfortable having on the field. And a backup nose tackle, you have Tim Settle, who's like awesome at the position. He's a lot closer to the run defender. I would say big fat guy, but he's not really a big fat guy. But he plays that way. He plays as a really strong interior guy who controls offensive linemen, shuts down gaps, and is really super, super useful. So you're awesome here. At edge, we'll start with the starters, obviously. And here is, I'm only going to be negative, basically, about this defense in two areas. One of them is an actual negative. One of them is just more of a like pump the brakes on this type of thing. And that's this one. Chase Young. Chase Young is already somebody I am thoroughly convinced, and can basically guarantee you, is going to be an exceedingly useful player for the entirety of his career. He's very good. But I will say, when you watch how he functioned his whole rookie year, he is way, way closer to a player like Cameron Jordan of the Saints than he is to like a Myles Garrett or Danielle Hunter or TJ, or a super high-end pass rusher. The reason being, and it actually connects to what I was talking about with Matt Ioannidis, is as a rusher, he's not actually a guy who frequently like wins, who's like getting a guy off of him and having a free shot at the quarterback. He's a lot closer to a Cameron Jordan or maybe even as Darius Smith, and that he can do that sometimes, but he's more about like, okay, I'm going to, work my way into the quarterback's lap and make him deal with me that way. I'm going to have my hands out to, affect passes and potentially cause forced fumbles. Like, listen, don't get it twisted. Like, the dude is good. He's extremely good. I'm very happy with him as a player, and especially as a rookie, for him to be as good as he was as a run defender too, actually surprised me a little bit, and I was impressed with that. So yeah, like, you have a bona fide like star in Chase Young for sure. But keep in mind that I actually think he's missing a little bit of that juice to be the high end pass rusher that some other guys around the NFL are. Montez Sweat on the other side is also really awesome in his own way. He is maybe the best weapon as far as defensive linemen go that there is in combating these modern spread NFL offenses, teams like the Rams, the 49ers, the Vikings, that type of stuff. Montez Sweat is so good, long and athletic as a edge, like run contained defender, that he can single-handedly force teams to play differently to his side because he's just going to shut that type of stuff down. He's so, so good at it. As a pass rusher, he's still good. He's still useful. He's more, though, of a like above average true speed rusher who, again, is going to struggle to like cleanly win a whole lot of the time. Not to say he's useless in that area. That's not true at all. He's definitely still good. He's still a player you like, but I will say keep that in mind. Problem here, though, is after those two, you have very little to like no depth. James Smith-Williams was a later round pick last year who did play some snaps and was actually like a little bit okay, but didn't show anything where you're like, oh yeah, he's like a useful player. And past him, it's a bunch of rookies, like guys who bounce around. Casey Toohill, who played a few snaps and wasn't good last year. Like, you get concerned. So then linebackers. So this is the other place I'll be a little bit negative, although not quite to the same extent. Jamin Davis, ignore that 37th. He's a rookie. so he shouldn't be ranked there. But yeah, Jamin Davis, he we'll see. I will say rookie linebackers frequently struggle, so keep that in mind before you get too high of expectations. But past him, you do have Khaleke Hudson, a guy who played some at the end of last year, wasn't a disaster, wasn't particularly good or a playmaker, but whatever. Then you have John Bostic. So he's the actual one that I'll talk about negatively on this whole defense. Which is saying something, by the way, because if John Bostic is your worst starter and it's at this position, you're going to be just fine. But John Bostic is a old school, big, between the tackles run defender who really struggles in coverage and doesn't particularly get sideline to sideline very well. He's not like the end of the world at that type of shit. There are worse guys around the NFL, but he's somebody, who if he's asked to do really athletic things or really modern things as far as covering guys over the middle or keeping up with these kind of goofy ass run plays that some teams run, he's going to struggle with that. Now he's surrounded by an amazing situation, so it makes his job a million times easier. I will say that, but just keep that in mind. As backup there, David Mayo's bad. Joe Walker's horrible, so don't want that. Cole Holcomb, though, as the other linebacker, is actually awesome. He's everything John Bostic's not in a lot of ways. He's an actual playmaker. He's a decent athlete. He can get out in space and make plays. He's not a disaster in coverage. He's very, very good all around. Now, he's not a super playmaker. He's not an elite guy at anything. He's not great. He's just kind of more replacement level in coverage as opposed to being bad. So that was what keeps him away from being an elite linebacker, but definitely a guy more than comfortable starting. And I think there's a chance that, when you get into nickel packages later on in the year, if it's him next to Jamin Davis, you could be looking at something even better than what's expected now. At outside corner, they're doing really, 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 really good again. And something to keep in note is that this team, the way that they play defense, they don't actually put all that much pressure on their corners to be great. They're not out here being okay, play press man and shut down this side of the field all the time. They're asking to do different things, kind of switch up coverages, play around with what they're doing. And you're going to combine that with corners who are already really good, and you're going to get good results. William Jackson III, again, they bring him in. He's one of these corners who, despite having some shortcomings in the areas, he can actually compete as a guy in man coverage against even some of the actual elite receivers around the NFL. Is he going to shut down a Devontae Adams? No, definitely not. But can he keep up with them the way that a lot of other corners can't and keep them from going, 12 for 180 and 2 touchdowns? He definitely can do that. So I like him a lot. And again, in this scheme, when he's not going to be asked to have to do that, I think he can maybe look even better. Then you have Kendall Fuller. Kendall Fuller's awesome. He's always around the ball. He makes a ton of plays. He tracks the ball very well. Again, he knows how to do the catch point. He has versatility. He can play in the slot. He can play as a safety a little bit. Kendall Fuller's awesome. Really, really good. And he fits the scheme very well, too. At depth, you do bring in Darryl Roberts, a player I like as an outside corner, especially, again, in the scheme. I think he can do well. Past them, you do run out of depth really quick. Benjamin St. Just is a high-ish round rookie, but then it's guys who've been in the system and not played for a long time. At slot, you have Jimmy Moreland, a player who I guarantee you doesn't suck, which is important to have. He's a guy who's not going to get burned in coverage frequently. He's pretty damn good as a run defender for his position. An overall guy that you like. So then at safety, the last position here, start with Landon Collins. Landon Collins, I think, is actually pretty underrated, to be honest with you. He does not, now he's not good in coverage, but the extent to which he's bad, I think, gets severely overrated. He can if stuff is happening in front of him, he can drive on the ball really well. He does mentally understand things, and it's not like he's a bad athlete. He's a little slow laterally. He's not somebody I want covering any good player in man coverage, sure, but I think he does a lot of things very similar to what Budda Baker does on the Cardinals, and everybody loves Budda Baker. Now, he's not the same level of athlete. He's not as good at them. I will say that, so don't get it confused there, but he can do a lot of the same things and be pretty decent at it. Also, he's a dominant run defender, makes plays all the time, against stuff, whether it's running or short passing game. He can come up and make plays a lot. Landon Collins is really good, and they're definitely happy to have him back. And then at that reserve, at that position, you have Cam Curl, 7th-round rookie who played last year a ton and was pretty damn good. Now, he concerns me a little bit more in coverage. I don't think he was a disaster at all, so I'll mention that again. But was he somebody I was like, oh, yeah, he's got it? No. But he's a playmaker around the line of scrimmage, at this, like the big safety kind of third linebacker spot. He's a guy I actually want on the field. Definitely comfortable with him. Then at free safety, you're probably going to be okay here. No one I love, and I have Jeremy Reeves listed as starter right now, literally just because he ended up starting at the end of last year with the injuries they were going through. But he showed that he can be on the field and not make your team suck, which is always the first. That's like the first box you ever want to check as a defensive player. So there's that. Then you have DeShazer Everett. DeShazer Everett is a veteran who is one of these, like, he's a safety. He's not going to do anything crazy. He's going to comfortably be behind most of the stuff happening with your defense to keep you from giving up really, really big plays. And actually, for the way the rest of this defense functions, I think he should be starting, and he could be really important just in being a guy who is always back there for sure. Then you also bring in Bobby McCain. Maybe, they have him listed as a corner on their roster. We'll see about that. He's played safety for a couple of years now with the Dolphins and been pretty decent at him. As far as a veteran who you're not expecting to start, like, I'm a big fan of this type of signing where he's somebody, if he comes in and has to play, I'm comfortable with him not sucking, very much so. Then you do have Troy Apke. Troy Apke's like unbelievably bad as a safety. He's actually similar to a player like Eric Harris on the Falcons, where despite them being like amazing athletes in combine stuff, when they actually get on the field, they don't use that athleticism constructively at all, and they end up getting you really, really hurt a lot of times. But yeah, how does this defense function as a whole? And the answer is, I think that it functions even better than last year, again, because of the presence of Matt Ioannidis. Because you go from a defensive line who's really good and going to affect a lot of quarterbacks, but does have a little bit of a weakness of being forced to collapse the pocket, can't always get to the quarterback super quickly, that type of stuff. You take that, and then you add a guy who can actually like knife through the line of scrimmage right in the middle, and all of a sudden that causes so many other things to happen in terms of forcing the quarterback into what Montez Sweat is doing, into what Chase Young is doing. And overall, like, they're going to kill people up front. People know that already, but if you want to know why, that's why. They're going to be so, so good there. So, and as a run defense, because of how good this front four is, they're going to be amazing. They also have Landon Collins back there, Cam Curl, their linebackers, and as run defense I'm comfortable with. So, yeah, they're good there. And like I said, yeah, as a pass defense with how good their rush is, plus how good their corners are, plus how not bad like their safety, like, they're going to be exceedingly good on the defensive side of the ball. So when you look ahead at their schedule, what are you concerned about? Well, offensively, I think you're worried about teams that, have like dominant defensive fronts, because while I do like this O-line, I think they're going to struggle with like the higher end of talent across the NFL. Or you're looking for teams that are going to play safe and disciplined and keep the ball in front of them and like let Ryan Fitzpatrick try to drive up down the field and beat them, because while he'll be able to move the ball, him in the red zone, as far as actually scoring points, can get a little scarier. But when you look at the schedule for that, they don't play a dominant defensive front. I mean, they play the Chiefs and Chris Jones. He's kind of by himself. I guess the Broncos, and then the Buccaneers week 8, week 10 will be the answer to that. And then the nice, soft, disciplined zone that does come up against the Giants and the Bills a little bit early in the season. But again, other than that, until you get to the Broncos, a team I don't think they match up with well at all, you're mostly fine. So I like this team quite a bit this year, because if you look at their schedule, I think they match up pretty damn well with a lot of these teams. They're going to be competitive because of how good their defense is in like every game. And overall, they're just going to end up being like a decent team for sure. So are they like a Super Bowl type caliber team? Yeah, I don't think so. But again, Washington football team, definitely, they all right.